These days, when you hear the name Dele, the first thing that usually comes to mind are a few questions. Where's he playing now? What's happened to him? In the past few seasons, his reputation has quickly turned into one big what could have been, painting the picture of a player who couldn't live up to the hype. That, however, is far from the truth. Rewind just a few years further and you get a very different picture. At Tottenham, Dele wasn't just a promising youngster. He was one of the best midfielders in the Premier League and one of the brightest young players in world football. Back-to-back PFA Young Player of the Year awards, 18 league goals in a single season, a Champions League double against that Real Madrid side. Oh, and let's not forget, on the biggest stage of them all, a World Cup quarter-final where he rose highest to lead England into the semis. These weren't flashes in the pan, this was cold hard proof of a player who belonged at the very top. So how did a teenager dominating against Europe's elite, a young star trusted to deliver for England, go from Spurs' golden boy to being written off before he even turned 25? And why is there far more to understand about his talent than meets the eye? Welcome to episode 2 of Respect the Name with Dele.
In towards Dele Alli! Dele Alli! The Spurs look for Dele Alli! What a finish!
Now it's with Dele Alli! Oh, what a goal! What a goal! What a season! What a player!
Now, Dele's footballing youth wasn't spent at a glamorous academy or on the fast track through England's elite youth system. He came from League One at 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗠𝗘, a club that many people actually mocked just for existing. When a footballer's journey starts in the lower leagues, there can be a bit of snobbery around from the higher ups, a bit of Premier League bias to those in the EFL. But when a player breaks into the first team at 16 years old no less and starts bossing games against hardened professionals, you can't help but take notice. Tall, athletic and technically sharp, he was gliding through opposition midfields like he was on his way to bigger and better things. The truth is though, it took a warm August evening in 2014 for those in the wider football community to really take notice, as Louis van Gaal's Manchester United were utterly torn apart 4-0 in the League Cup by 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗠𝗠. This was Van Gaal's side, who had spent big in the summer, had just announced the purchase of Ángel Di María for £60 million and boasted senior pros in the starting 11 like Javier Hernandez, Shinji Kagawa, David De Gea and Johnny Evans. But regardless, the midfield belonged to Dele. His confidence on the ball, his competitiveness in every challenge, the maturity in his positioning. This was a warning shot to the rest of English football. Scouts from Europe's biggest clubs were in the stand that night, and a few months later, after more standout displays, Spurs made their move. At the time, $5 million still looked like a gamble, despite all of his potential, but it was one they couldn't afford to walk away from. Jumping from League One to the Premier League is usually a slow burn. Most expected Dele to sit on the bench, learn the ropes, maybe even go back out on loan. He did for the second half of that season after Spurs had signed him. But instead, he blew the bloody doors off the Premier League. 10 goals and 9 assists in his very first season. Man of the match displays in the North London derby, a serious link-up developing with Harry Kane, and winning PFA Young Player of the Year for the first time. And then there was the wonder goal at Selhurst Park, arguably the finest goal of the decade.
Stopping the crosses coming in here, Palace. Ali, great skill. Oh, what a goal!
If his debut season had been impressive, the next one proved that it wasn't just beginner's luck. By 2016-17, Dele wasn't just emerging, he was dominating. And the question was, how good could he become? Could he be the next Lampard, the next Gerrard, or even better? Playing just behind Harry Kane in Pochettino's high-energy 4-2-3-1 system, Dele thrived. His timing into the box was devastating, arriving late like a striker but with a vision of a midfielder. He scored 18 Premier League goals that season. That's more than most strikers, and he was only 20 years old. Beyond the numbers though, there was a style to him that made him unforgettable. The skills, the audacious attempts, the swagger, which by the way, wasn't just for show. October 2017, Wembley, under the lights. Spurs against Real Madrid, the reigning Champions League winners. Ronaldo, Modric, Ramos, Kroos, a team built to dominate Europe. Nights like this were supposed to be theirs, but if you were there or even watching on TV, you'll remember it. The game belonged to Dele.
Here's Winks, looking for 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏, who's in behind them again. There's another good goal, and there's the goal, and he's back in the Champions League, and back with a bang. It's Dele Alli for Tottenham Hotspur. Dele Alli away from Casemiro, and stands still, and the deflection. Oh, he's done it again.
Spurs 3, Real Madrid 1. The atmosphere electric, the disbelief real. For a few hours it felt like Tottenham could be anyone, and at the centre of it all was their number 20. It wasn't just a group stage win, it was the night Dele announced himself on the European stage. Spurs fans still talk about that night as one of their greatest ever European victories. Believe me. Transfer rumours swirled yet again, and this time the names were even bigger. Barcelona, Real Madrid, PSG. At his peak, Spurs valued Dele at more than £100 million. In the space of 2 seasons, he'd gone from League One teenager to one of the hottest properties in world football, and naturally, that spotlight carried over to the international stage. Now, we've seen this story many times before and arguably once or twice since, but England fans are always waiting on the next superstar, the next talisman to drive this new generation forward, and Dele looked like he could be the one. I mean, there's no wonder fans up and down the country got excited about him after witnessing his England senior debut.
Here's Ali. Oh! How to announce yourself as an England player.
Still a teenager, but he was already carrying himself like a star. Although part of the ultimately unsuccessful Euro 2016 squad for England, Dele brought his best self to the World Cup 2 years later in Russia. Southgate had built a team around youth and energy, and Dele fit in perfectly. In the quarter-final against Sweden, with England leading 1-0, he ghosted into the box, rose above the defence and nodded in the second. 22 years old, he'd scored in a World Cup quarter-final. Only a handful of English players have ever done that. For England fans, it felt like the start of something. Dele wasn't just another name on the team sheet, but part of the new core, a new hope, with Kane leading the line, Sterling in his prime, and Dele ghosting into the box just at the right moment. It felt like the first chapter of a very long story, but football has a cruel way of flipping the script. What felt like the start of something special turned out to be his last truly great moment in an England shirt. So, what actually happened? How did the boy wonder England's future end up fading so quickly? By 2019, things started to look a little different. The goals had dried up, the flair seemed almost muted. Suddenly, the player who made everything look so easy was struggling to make anything look simple. Now, this wasn't exactly setting alarm bells ringing. He was still a young player, and every pro goes through peaks and troughs in their career, especially at a young age. Injuries, though, played their part. Hamstrings, groins, the kind of knocks that rob a player of their rhythm. But the criticisms weren't just about his fitness. There were reports of a party-heavy lifestyle and the lack of professionalism off the pitch, whether true or not, that led to pundits to question his attitude. And then came the Spurs All or Nothing documentary. The cameras caught then manager Jose Mourinho in his office with Dele.
I understood already that you are a fucking lazy guy in training.
Time flies. And I think one day, you will regret.
That one line stuck more than any beautiful moment of inspiration could on the pitch. For many fans, that was it. Dele wasn't a wonder kid anymore. He was lazy, he was the butt of online jokes, he was the target of ridicule, the poster boy for lost potential. I mean, look, it's one thing to hear pundits call you lazy on TV, but it's another when your own manager says it straight to your face and then everyone sees it. That's enough to ruin anyone's confidence. In the coming years, as manager after manager couldn't get the best out of him at Spurs, the club eventually moved him on, and by summer of 2023, he was halfway through an uninspiring Everton spell, which included a brief and frustrating loan to 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 in Turkey, and unknowingly heading into a Premier League season where he wouldn't play a single minute. By the age of 26, Dele had gone from one of the most valuable players in the world to a what happened story. And for many fans, the conclusion was simple. It was just wasted talent. But the real story was about to come out, and it wasn't the one anyone expected. In 2023, Dele sat down with Gary Neville for a podcast episode of The Overlap. At first, people thought it would be just another football interview about form, injuries, and a sort of what went wrong look back. Instead, it became one of the most emotional and revealing conversations English football has ever seen. Dele spoke about his childhood, how he was abused as a child, smoking by age 8, dealing drugs at 12 and adopted at 13. All of this before he even touched the heights of professional football. And when he did make it to the top, the scars never really went away. At 24, he checked into rehab, and for years, whilst fans, pundits and even managers labelled him lazy, Dele was silently fighting battles that most people couldn't even imagine. It wasn't that he was looking for excuses or anything, he was just bringing forward the human side of things, a side rarely taken into account when discussing footballers, high-performance athletes or anyone in the grips of fame. The drop-off, the inconsistent performances, they weren't about laziness or poor attitude at all. They were about the struggle of dealing with internal problems and issues, all whilst being unable to escape the spotlight and work on them in his own time. To make it from that background to achieving what he did in such a short top-level career, the story here isn't of wasted talent, it's of resilience, strength and completely defying the odds. Ultimately, it's easy to judge a footballer by what they didn't do, and with Dele the temptation is huge. He never sustained the level his talent suggested. He dipped when fans expected him to be at his best. He didn't dominate for a decade like Gerrard or Lampard, but all of that expectation and pressure only existed because of the remarkable feats he achieved at such a young age in the first place. If the same dip, right, happened today to Jude Bellingham, Cole Palmer, people would be stunned. That was the level that Dele was at. Honestly, the heights he reached deserve way more respect. What he achieved, everything he went through, deserves even more. But here's the interesting part. Dele's story could be far from over. I'm sat here in September 2025, and after his spell at Como has come to a premature end, guess what? He's still only 29. All I'm saying is that there's plenty of players who are yet to create their most memorable work at that age, who found new life in the latter part of their career. For a period, Dele was unplayable, one of the best attacking midfielders on the planet. And given what we now know about the trauma he carried with him, those highs look even more remarkable. Dele, respect the name.
Ali, what a goal! To Dele Alli, great finish. Dele Alli, wow, what a finish!
There's Ali, can he get a touch? Brilliant control! Wonderful goal!